It was a dramatic day here in Copenhagen for climate negotiators, the press, NGOs, protesters, and more. Amid demonstrations and police firing pepper spray and beating protesters with batons outside the Bella Center, inside the Bella Center, climate negotiators continued to try to bridge huge gaps on issues that divide nations here. Late Wednesday, breaking news: an agreement was struck between the U.S., France, the U.K., Australia, Japan, and Norway. They have agreed to contribute $3.5 billion over 3 years to fight deforestation. $1 billion of that will come from the U.S. Here's what else happened today. African nations and the EU came closer to agreements on climate financing, both fast track and medium term, apparently scaling back their demands for rich countries. This is seen by some officials as a possible break in a big deadlock in negotiations here. Still, the least developed countries, many of them in Africa, they want to see a lot more in both money and emissions reductions cuts. If not, they say we will not sign a suicide pact. Another big piece of news out of this conference: the Danish Prime Minister Lars Rasmussen came out and offered a new draft treaty here at the conference. This is a move that angered a lot of delegations, including the Brazilians and the Chinese.
This is part in the dream process. You can't just put forward some text from the sky.
Many nations saw that as an attempt to try to replace the work they've done on treaties over the past 2 years. UNFCCC Executive Secretary Evo de Boer came out and commented on that. He said the new Danish text is not meant as a replacement.
What has become very clear in the course of the evening is that that text needs to be considered in the context of the documents that have already been prepared and into which people have put a great deal of energy. I think that the Danish text can potentially serve a useful role, perhaps as a bridge-building exercise where things are stuck, but what people made very clear in the plenary this morning is that they have a great attachment for the documents that they themselves produced and want to see those be at the heart of a result that emerges from Copenhagen.
Our executive editor, Margaret Ryan, joins me now, who was in the same press conference with Evo de Boer. And in there, Margaret, he expressed some heartfelt worry about the safety of the heads of state coming in here.
Well, the safety of the whole conference. You know, he said this is beyond his experience in running these climate conferences. He said he was pretty proud of the fact that these conferences have always been open, lots of public observers. He said it's not like the G8 or the G20 conferences where city blocks downtown are all blocked off for security. And he said this time it's really a new situation. He said today alone there have been several incidents of formations of kind of flash mobs of demonstrators, people climbing podiums to disrupt the proceedings. He said there have been several cases where strange packages were left around. And he said, you know, this is beyond anything he's ever seen. And his hand actually may be forced by the security teams that come with these world leaders. They may be forced to cut off much more public access here.
Wow, well, he seemed visibly worried. Also, as these world leaders come in here, the biggest face from the U.S. today was Senator John Kerry.
That's right. Senator Kerry drew quite a crowd here. A lot of people interested to hear him. You know, he apologized to the conference, to the people here, for being the only U.S. senator who showed up. He said many, many more members of Congress did plan to come, but with the health care votes and other pending legislation, they simply couldn't break away. He himself's here for only about 24 hours. He's held bilateral meetings with the Chinese, the Indians, the European Union, and some small island states. And he said he thinks whatever comes out of Copenhagen is going to be instrumental in what happens in Washington.
Needless to say, the next 12 hours, 24 hours, and ultimately 48 hours when the heads of state get here are critical. Success in Copenhagen is really critical to success next year in the United States Senate and in the Congress. Just last week, many people are not aware of this, in North Carolina, an announcement was made that will shut down 11 coal-fired power plants. In South Carolina, they are refusing to build any new coal-fired power plants. And I am convinced that new finds in natural gas are going to produce a significant amount of fuel switching in the United States, and there will be very significant reductions. I am personally absolutely confident that if we can move forward on our target We are going to exceed that target. We will eclipse it dramatically, with much greater ease and in much less time than many people anticipate.
Now, Senator Kerry stressed that no country is doing enough yet to confront the climate crisis. And he said, worst, it would be just a terrible irony if the developing countries now did nothing more than repeat the climate mistakes that the developed countries have made.
Okay, Margaret Ryan, thank you for that. And as night falls here in Copenhagen, it looks like the Danish Prime Minister will be spending the evening meeting with different regional groups, probably well into the night, trying to find a consensus on a lot of the issues that divide many of the groups here. Also, as more and more world leaders pour in, one thing is becoming clear: with so many undecided issues on the negotiations that have happened over the last 2 years, so many of those decisions might be falling right into the laps of world leaders over the next 2 days. In Copenhagen for Clean Skies News, I'm Susan McGinnis.